We wanted to talk about this petition that we released to the city yesterday um, regarding our shared streets and car-free parks. We have, at this point, almost 1,300 signatures, and just a kind of a bit of reason why we started this petition and what we're asking for. I live along a shared street in Cap Hill. I can look down my alleyway and I see a constant stream of people walking and biking, and it's just been such a benefit for the neighborhood. It was started as a means for social distancing with COVID, but I think the benefits go far, far beyond that. If you look at our petition, there are many comments and testimonials stating why people are enjoying how they're using these shared streets and why they want them to be made permanent. And I think that's a testimony to how strong they are. My personal experience is I bike to work at Denver Health Hospital on 11th Avenue. I was working in the COVID ward for most of March and April. And when those barricades went up and closed the street through traffic, it just made for one moment of my day that was really enjoyable and relaxing and stress-free, biking to work and not worrying about cars turning into me or buzzing past me. I'm also able to ride with my kids now in the street rather than the sidewalk. Just so many benefits. So our main ask of the city of Mayor Hancock and Department of Transportation and Infrastructure is to make these shared streets, these car-free parks, a permanent change to our neighborhoods and to really expand them. I wish everyone could have the opportunity to experience my commute to work, and they really need to extend into new neighborhoods. We're gonna go around and let some people in the community describe their experiences, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Actually, David, can you have whoever's not talking just mute their phones, because it jumps up and the sound and the recordings are kind of hurt by that?
Yes, please. Everyone mute. Okay. Okay, why don't we go to Tenley first, and I think she was going to speak about her experience with these streets. Tenley, can you unmute?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about my experience. I echo a lot of what David said. I think my family has used many, I possibly all, but certainly many of the shared streets, including 30th, 11th, 16th, Bayard, Marion. Bayard and Marion are the closest to our home. And I wish that we lived on a street that was a shared street. I hope that they do expand. And I was thinking a lot of different things I might talk about today. You know, frequently when I'm on Marion, I see a couple that are both wheelchair users, and they're out strolling on the street side by side, which is something that really isn't possible without shared streets. Sidewalks aren't wide enough for them to do that. And it just really warmed my heart to see that. I also thought about the fact that when schools shut down back in March, I started a daily 11 a.m. bike ride. And shared streets gave me the opportunity to actually take other kids along with me. I didn't feel limited to just my own two kids, which can be a real stretch when you are on streets with cars or even trying to cross streets with cars. And I can just speak to the fact that parents are really overwhelmed right now, especially in Denver. School's not going to be in person anytime soon, and we need to be helping each other out. And shared streets are one way that I, as a parent, can help my kids get exercise, get outdoors, see some of their peers safely from a safe distance. We always wore masks. We kept our hands on the handlebars. And there were times when parents said, hey, can you take my kids on this ride for me because they need to get out of the house. I need some time to get work done, do whatever they needed to do without the kids in the house. And shared streets really made that possible. And then the last thing I want to say is just that I agree that the COVID pandemic has really brought into sharp focus a lot of the health issues in the state of Denver, but many of them were issues before the pandemic hit. It's just that we see them more starkly now. I know a lot of people are feeling trapped. They're either feeling trapped indoors or out of the gyms that they typically used. They may be feeling really limited in any number of ways. And the shared streets were a way for us to get untrapped and make a more relaxing commute to work, maybe a way to connect with our neighbors, get the exercise and the air, the fresh air that we needed outside of our own homes. So I just want to emphasize that definitely during this pandemic, but also beyond the pandemic, I think shared streets are going to be a great way for Denver citizens to get untrapped and feel more independence, more freedom, especially for children who may not be able to navigate the streets safely when there are a bunch of vehicles on them.
Thank you, Tenley. Next, we have Lucy O'Dwyer, who's going to give the perspective of the younger generation. Let me just unmute.
Sorry. I am a student at Lincoln Elementary, and we have been very cooped up in our house lately with this whole pandemic. So it has allowed, so my mom and dad have allowed me, my sister and I, to have more freedom with the streets closed. So we live a block away from Downing. So I think that we should be able to use the streets more often, because my family and I, we always go on bike rides in the evening when it's cooler. My dad is off work. So it's just way easier to use the closed streets all the way to the park instead of having to go around traffic. And including my 6-year-old sister, and sometimes when I'm biking on busy streets with her, I get really, really nervous. So, yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Lucy. I have 2 girls who are 6 and 8, and we only need to cross one street to get to the park, and they should be able to get there on their own, but it's not something I feel safe doing in the old state. Now, with the street reconfigured and giving priority to people walking, it feels a whole lot more comfortable for us. Next, I think Joel Dice. I'm going to unmute and mute myself, and he lives in Park Hill and has 2 kids and wanted to just say a word.
Yeah, I'll be pretty quick. Yeah, I've been biking and running and walking in Denver for decades, but only recently became a parent. And like we've already heard from others, you know, I'm very sensitive to their safety, and I also feel pretty foolish, you know, driving, you know, a mile or two to a park or a bike trail or what have you. These amenities that allow my kids to get out and explore and play. So having these, I don't actually have any of these shared streets really close to me right now, but I can kind of bridge City Park over to 16th Street or Marion Parkway down to Wash Park. And I feel a lot more comfortable now with those streets being sort of traffic calmed, to be able to take them in the trailer or run them in the jogging stroller or what have you. So it is, you know, Denver's already a very bike-friendly and pedestrian-friendly place, much more so than other cities I've lived in. And we've got great weather. So I feel like this is just a great step in the right direction to make that an even more attractive feature of our city. So.
Thanks, Joel. I don't know if Kathleen Schmidt is here. I had her on the list, but I don't see her name. Kathleen, if you're here, can you raise your hand? Maybe not. Okay. Are there any questions from any of the media or other folks? You can either type in the chat or I can unmute you if you'd like to speak out loud.
So you guys delivered this to the mayor's office yesterday, you said?
We did. The petition is still open and accepting signatures. In fact, we probably had another 150 since yesterday, but we delivered it yesterday. There's some concern that these shared streets could go away after Labor Day, so we really wanted to get this in to make an impact in that decision.
Were you able to speak with any member of the mayor's staff at all?
Not yet. We have gotten some good responses from City Council. We have not heard from the mayor or Department of Transportation, but it's been probably less than 24 hours now. So we're hoping to hear a response from them.
Who did you speak with on the council?
Chris Hines has been very supportive. A lot of the shared streets go through his district, and he's taken a big role in kind of making sure they're working well. I would say he's been one of the biggest advocates with us.
And have you, since it also probably impacts restaurants, have you talked to any of them about their push to maybe keep these streets open?
We have not. I think some of the business districts that have closed streets or used parking lots, definitely it's all kind of one related, and we would love to see more of those districts. That's we started this petition back in April, I think, when those didn't exist, but I think we would certainly be supportive of more of those blocks being closed off to traffic.
And what's kind of the biggest reason behind doing all of this?
I can speak for myself, and maybe others can chime in. The reason for the petition, is that, or just shared streets in general?
Just why would you want to do this petition for the shared streets? Why? This obviously this is something you might have been pushing for before. But this now kind of just emphasize that or something? Yeah,
I think that when space is taken away from cars and given to people walking and biking, there is a very kind of loud, outspoken group that is opposed to this, and they've shut it down before. There's supposed to be a car-free pilot in a part of Cheeseman Park 2 years ago, and that pilot never even got off the ground because of opposition. So we just wanted to make the voices heard of all the people who are really enjoying this and maybe didn't think to contact the city, but really want to see this continued.
And have you talked to a bunch of the businesses at all on these blocks where they are closed down, or anybody else on those blocks just outside the homeowners?
Not me personally. I'm gonna unmute, and if anyone else in the bicycle lobby or otherwise wants to chime in.
I spoke to Carmine's on Penn when I was talking to them about the possibility of doing some street art on the shared street on Bayard, which is right at the intersection of Pennsylvania and Bayard, where Carmine's is. And they seemed really excited about the idea of street art and really positive about the shared streets.
I also think it's important to kind of make a distinction between the open and shared streets started, and then there's also like parallel work on places like Larimer Square that we see in some of the business districts, and those are kind of two separate efforts. I think a lot of the shared streets were chosen for thoroughfares that were already really bike and pedestrian heavy, and maybe not necessarily through commercial districts. Like 16th Avenue takes you to a park, 11th kind of gets you down to Golden Triangle and up to the park. So they were really transit corridors. that was kind of the goal of, I think, the shared and open streets. And then the close down or parking spaces for restaurants, that was kind of a separate initiative, but both have been great to see.
Yeah, the shared streets are definitely in residential neighborhoods. They're generally, except for maybe a few blocks, not on commercial districts.
Yeah.
But I would love to see the businesses take advantage. I know when I go down 11th Avenue and there's the pizza place and the sandwich shop, and I imagine they're getting a lot of foot traffic from this. So I think it could be a benefit to them.
I know the spot also at Pennsylvania and Bayard, they've got seating in a parking spot on the shared street. So I can imagine that they would appreciate slower vehicle traffic through there. And the nice thing about the shared streets is it puts everyone on an equal playing field, which I feel like doesn't happen as often as it should. So every user of the street has a right to be there and a responsibility to look out for one another. So drivers can certainly still go down and access a restaurant, go down a shared street and park in front of it and access it just like they could before. It's just that now we're officially, formally saying, please watch out for vulnerable road users.
And to be clear, the Denver Bicycle Lobby has tried to increase commercial street adoption in other neighborhoods, but one of the big problems that these operators run into is that their streets are designated as collectors or arterials by CDOT. And so that creates an obstacle for them to get through the red tape with the city to close off the street to cars.
And do you think this is something that can be long-term feasible even through the winter? As no summer, obviously, there's a lot of bikes, there's a lot of stuff. In the winter, we're not going to have quite as much of that.
This is Tinley here. I'd love to chime in on a couple things, especially that point about the weather. We advocates hear about the weather all the time, and I'm actually biking less now because it's so hot. In the fall, winter, spring, those are my favorite times to bike. I feel that it's safer to be on my bicycle. I have a bike with really fat tires. I feel that it's safer to be on my bicycle in snowy and icy conditions than in my car. And if I have safe avenues, like safe streets where I don't have to worry about cars plowing into me, I'm going to use those routes even more. And I also want to just piggyback on what some other folks have said about coordinating with businesses and things like that. We don't have to speculate about this. We do have data. And my husband, Kevin Williams, has collected some of this data about the economic impacts of bicycle routes in a city. And they are many, and they are big, big impacts. Everything from, bicyclists tend to contribute more to the economy than drivers do. They spend less per trip, but they make more visits to the stores and spend more money overall. The health impacts are enormous. When you have more people bicycling, there are myriad health benefits, everything from fewer car crash fatalities to, less obesity, better heart health, and things like that. So I'd be happy to get you some of that data if that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
And in regards to the winter comment, I think there's only I bike full time to get around town. I think there's maybe 4 days a year where I really can't do that. And that's the day after it dumps a ton of snow. But I find that less people are driving in the winter and the streets get cleared pretty quickly, either by plowing in some areas or just the sun melting the snow. And I generally have the road to myself and it's quite calm. And yeah, I bike all year round. So I personally, from me and the people that I bike with, we'll be using these through the winter just as much as we are now.
Well, and I know when you're on your feet, which we love pedestrians as well, but sidewalks are really poorly cleared in Denver. And one thing about these shared streets that's really awesome is we can use the same plowing plan that we use for the rest of the city and have, instead of leaping over giant pools of snowy melted water, we can have really walkable pedestrian streets in the middle of the winter, which is super awesome.
Cool.
That's a huge factor from a disability standpoint too. The sidewalks around Denver are a huge hurdle for people with disabilities or mobility impairments, and shared streets would be, I think, a welcome improvement.
So did we talk enough about the open streets in the parks? Because I wanted to add that in Wash Park, what I've noticed now that cars aren't allowed to get into the park is a whole new set of people using the park by themselves. Upper elementary age kids, 4th, 5th, maybe 6th graders, kids that you don't normally see out on their own, looping the park on their bike by themselves, which is amazing. And I've heard from one of our blind neighbors here in West Wash Park how much safer he feels when he's out. He's actually the blind runner. How much safer he feels using the park now that there's no cars once he enters the park.
So I am a part of Kenley Williams' bike at 11 o'clock, and I find it way more fun to bike in the fall because it's cooler and it's just way more doable than biking in the summer in the heat.
On those days that it's too snowy to bike, you probably don't want to be driving either. The roads are just a mess, but most of the days it's passable if you have the right gear and clothes.
Cool. That's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you.
I just put it in the chat, but we have street art on 4 of the shared streets that Denver Bicycle Lobby helped to put down. Those are on Byron, Marion, 16th, and 30th. And these are different stencils that we've painted on the street, along the street. Marion in particular was also the intervention for Alexis Bound's her memorial ride. So feel free to go to those locations and film the shared streets there.
And if anybody wants to do get an in-person interview at one of the shared streets or meet some of the folks out in the parks or the streets, just email Alan, who is his contact info is in the press release, and we'd be happy to meet up with you outside.
Would that be available today within the next hour or so?
I personally, I've got no plans this afternoon, and I think a couple of us are available. So sure, for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, does someone want to put Alan's email and phone number in the chat? Is it Rob? Do you have that handy?
Yeah, I can drop that in there.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Any last minute questions or thoughts or comments? Okay. Well, it was good chatting. Please be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.